League's best passer, O.J. Simpson, is one setback, and Larry Zonka is the other. We're looking forward to a good game. We hope that all of you will be able to join us in Miami, the Orange Bowl, for tomorrow night's Pro Bowl. This is Frank Gifford. Good evening.
It has nothing to do with the race. It's the fact that they're jamming them on us. We don't want these people.
I worked the mill a long, long time. Nothing else I know.
If the State of the Union is not good, the state of this town is unbearable. Almost.
I got no place to go.
I'm Morley Safer.
I'm Mike Wallace. Those stories and more tonight on 60 Minutes. First, these headline items. 2 Arab terrorists are still holding 3 hostages at Paris Orly Airport after making an unsuccessful grenade attack on an Israeli plane. Paris police say the terrorists are demanding that a plane be provided for them by 10 o'clock tonight Eastern Time, although they have not specified a destination. The Palestine Liberation Organization in Paris say they have nothing to do with the terrorists and have condemned them. Efforts continue in Belfast to arrange a renewal of the Irish Republican Army's truce, but a 7-year-old boy died there today in a terrorist mine explosion. In this country, the Oil Workers Union says it has reached agreement with the Mobile and City Service oil companies on a 2-year national contract, thus averting a walkout by 6,700 members. And 2 polls in the news tonight. Newsweek says a majority of Americans favor gasoline rationing to conserve fuel instead of President Ford's plan to impose taxes that would result in higher gasoline prices and thus hold down oil consumption. And the latest Gallup poll indicates that 62% of the U.S. public believes that religion can solve all or most of today's problems. 60 Minutes continues in a moment.
The Jaguar XJ is neither all performance nor all luxury. During its design and development, Jaguar gave no absolute veto power to either stylist or engineer. For the Jaguar is a complete motor car, one that performs its function as a road car with agility and stamina, yet offers its owners those elusive qualities of grace, dignity, and exclusivity.
Neil Simon could just be the most successful playwright in the history of the Broadway theater. He is surely one of the richest. In 15 years, he has written 14 plays and made millions from them. Barefoot in the Park, The Odd Couple, Plaza Suite, The Sunshine Boys, all of them hilarious. But Neil Simon wants to be more than merely funny. He writes of man's condition, and he sees the pain behind the grin. That is what his latest play is about. It's called God's Favorite. It's a modern version of the Bible story of Job. The question is, can even Neil Simon make that tragic story funny? Tonight, we'll get the answer. It's opening night on Broadway for God's Favorite. Neil Simon and the company have been working 18-hour days for 2 months. It is not this audience that will tell them whether or not the play works, it's the critics. Notably this man, Clive Barnes, who writes for the New York Times. His notice can make or break this show. But let's go back 8 weeks to this same theater. That day, it was empty.
Why would God send a message to me, Joe Benjamin, a plain, simple, ordinary man?
Neil Simon says he wrote the play with this man, Vince Gardenia, on his mind for the lead. The character he plays is a wealthy Jewish businessman who is asked by God to renounce God.
It's enough already, dear God. Don't give me any more.
Gardenia's star has been rising. He got an Oscar nomination for Bang the Drum Slowly last year. This year he stars in Death Wish. He's Archie Bunker's neighbor on television.
What does anything mean?
What do you mean by what does anything mean?
What is the meaning of this? What is meant by meaning? What is here? What is there? What is real? What is unreal? What the hell are we talking about?
Charles Nelson Riley plays God's messenger. He's won a Tony Award on Broadway, but mostly you see him these days on television, in game shows and variety shows.
But who am I? What am I? Why am I here? That's the mystery, isn't it? God, I love a good mystery. Did you see Chinatown? Jack Nicholson, Faye Dunaway. They cut his nose and he wore a Band-Aid for 2 hours. $3.50 a ticket to see a man with a slit nose.
Both Riley and Gardenia could make a lot more money in films and TV. They're doing this show because it's Neil Simon, and that's prestige. Simon wrote this play 4 years ago, rewrote it and rewrote it again. He rides a roller coaster from euphoria to despair and back during the making of his plays. He thinks that this play reads funny, but he's never certain till he sees the actors on their feet.
Boiling, roasting, burning.
In the hands of director Michael Bennett, Gardenia and Riley take their first faltering steps on stage. They barely know their lines. They're trying to shape their characters, and Bennett is choreographing them through their moves.
Somebody, what?
Right.
Somebody.
Yes, yes. But keep, once you get the charades going,
Right.
keep them so that each is helping each other.
The play seems to be running much longer than I anticipated, so I will obviously be cutting more when I get to New Haven, but it would be premature to cut too much now. I would rather have the audience tell me in New Haven what I should cut, and they'll tell me.
3 weeks after the first day of rehearsal, the company takes the bus to New Haven for the terrors of the out-of-town tryout. Riley, Gardenia, Maria Karnilova, who plays Gardenia's wife, and the rest of the cast. Life for a theatrical company on its way to Broadway is kin to life aboard a submarine, isolated, single-minded, out of touch with every other reality. For better or worse, for richer or poorer, you're all in this thing together.
But I mean, we spend the better part of every day together for 5 weeks, and then we start spending the better part of every day and every night together. Plus thinking about, in those hours between the night and the morning, the show constantly. Yeah. So we're the best people to be with is to be together because we're boring for other people, because all we want to do is talk about the show, because that's all we're thinking about.
Lon?
Yeah.
When this sound effects goes, there'll be like four cues where it starts that we want to do the lightning.
This is called a tech rehearsal, a shakedown cruise for the lighting man, the sound technician, and the stage manager.
Alternately or something, not exactly like we did it the first time.
Right.
It's bananas time now, because I really can't tell anything. There is half the time I sit there and I say, oh, it looks terrific. I just love every minute of it. And I'll sit 10 minutes later, I say, it's the most embarrassing thing I've ever seen. I've got to run away to another town. So I really lose perspective as we get closer and closer.
November 18th, half an hour before opening night curtain in New Haven. A night almost as nerve-wracking as a Broadway opening, because tonight, for the first time, everyone is playing for keeps. The New Haven critics will be here, but more to the point, people from New York and Hollywood will be out front. Agents, producers, friends, and enemies, looking to see if Neil Simon has done it again, or if perhaps tonight, for the first time, he has failed.
How much time we got, you know?
7 minutes.
7 minutes.
Everybody's here from New York, I can tell. I met a few of them in the lobby, and that was a shock. I didn't think they'd come for the preview, but I guess they do. They sneak in.
I can't drive a big truck. I can't, land an airplane, but I can go out there and be Sidney Leonard Lipton, because that's what I do, and I'm not going to be nervous.
How long for you?
Yeah.
It's tremendous responsibility, because every damn thing is a laugh line. If you blow one, you feel like a fool.
But I'm Sidney Leonard Lipton. What the heck? It'll be all right. It always has been.
Try to relax here before the show.
Let's get on. Start it. Give the okay. 5 minutes, please. 5 minutes, please.
In the first act, Vince Gardenia is bewildered by the abrupt appearance of a disreputable-looking character who came in through the window bearing a message for him.
You're his favorite. Yes, and everyone. I don't mean just this neighborhood, Joe. I mean everyone. Yes, you, Joseph Benjamin, are considered to be his, that's capital H again, his absolute favorite. And that is the honest to God's truth. God's truth. Am I getting through to you at all?
Are you trying to tell me that
Say it, Joseph. Say it. You'll only believe if you get the words out.
That you are you trying to say that you...
Yes. I can't answer unless you ask me, Joseph.
I can't get the words out. It's so inconceivable.
Joe. Get the words out. Who, Joe? Who am I trying to tell you who I am?
God! Are you trying to tell me that you're God? Who?
God! God, is that what you thought? That I was going to tell you that I was God? Oh, my God. Well, that I never figured on. That's really crazy. I mean, do I look like God? Would God wear a filthy Robert Hole raincoat and a pair of leaky hush puppies? In the winter? Would God wear glasses? If anyone's going to have good eyes, it's going to be God. He's the one that gave them out, Dojo. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I am not God.
Then who are you?
I'm a friend of God.
Oh.
At the end of the first act on opening night, the crowd was up, happy. But in the second act, the comedy turned serious, and so did the audience.
I am what my God made me.
I am what my God made me.
What is this, Othello? Listen to him, the King Lear of the dinner theaters.
Outside the theater, after the curtain came down, it became apparent that Neil Simon was going to have to do a lot of fixing.
No, I didn't think it was funny.
The first act was very good.
What about the
The
second?
second was, it left a lot to be desired. It took a long time to get off the ground.
My reaction, I really didn't enjoy it all that much.
Might be God's favorite, but it's not mine.
The morning after, I talked to Vince Gardenia and Charlie Riley. You're not worried?
No, I used to worry for 40 years. I don't worry anymore. It's going to be wonderful.
What is there to worry about? I'm not worried at all. Whether we succeed or not, I hope we succeed. But I'm in a great play. It's a magnificent role. And if this does not succeed, I will still say I am very proud to be in this.
It's not a lot of writing. It's not a lot. It's just a little something thing that something will happen and we'll find it.
We'll find it, or Simon will find it?
We'll all find it.
Simon's going to find it, of course. And what he gives us, we hope to contribute to that, hopefully.
I mean, you can play Pollyanna and say, I'm happy to be in this great play, Neil Simon, this giant of the American theater, and you can say... But the fact of the matter is...
We're in trouble.
Half an hour later, the New Haven paper's review of God's Favorite was on the newsstands. It was not good. A holy bore, they called it. Neil Simon had just read the notice when we talked to him.
I don't think that I would do anything different today if the review in the New Haven paper was a rave. I still will go about my business and do my work.
What's your business?
To fix up the play the way I think it needs to be fixed up. I listen to the audience. They're not just sitting there. They're not booing. They're not miserable. They're laughing. And when we left the theater last night, we all felt good. Now, because one person on the New Haven newspaper said, this doesn't work, doesn't make it so. It may be eventually, but right now it doesn't make it so.
After Saturday night's performance, you told us you have just seen the death of a play. It's never going to work.
Shouldn't listen to those people or what somebody says in panic. I mean, I say things like that.
You said it.
I've said it 14 times. On Promises, Promises, we were in rehearsal, and I called David Merrick, and I said, David, you've got to close this. It's humiliating. It's the most embarrassing thing I've ever seen. Well, David respects me and thinks I'm talented, and he said, well, if you feel that badly, maybe we should do it. I'll come down and see it. So he came and saw the run-through, and he said, you're having one of your panic tantrums. Forget about it. It's wonderful. We went to Boston, and it was wonderful. So you must disregard those things, because I say that when I can't find my shoes at home.
In 3 weeks, the show's going to open in New York. How different will that play be from what we saw here last night?
If I keep adding or changing 3 or 4 minutes every single night in the next 2 weeks, there will be a substantial change in the play. We are dealing with a subject that a lot of people say, hey, you can't treat that comedically. That's the Bible.
What's funny about Job?
Yeah. Well, but a lot of my plays have treated subjects that were serious comedically. It's a precarious line that I'm walking, and I think that's what the challenge is. I can't go on riding barefoot in the park all my life.
It's 3 weeks later. The curtain has just come down on the Broadway opening of God's Favorite, and Clive Barnes is on his way to write his review at the New York Times. At Sardi's restaurant, a cast party is about to begin. And at the advertising agency for the show, Neil Simon's good friend, producer Manny Eisenberg, waits for the phone call, which will give him word of Clive Barnes' review. Neil Simon? He's in hiding. Eisenberg will call him when all the notices are in. At Sardi's, Charlie Riley's friends don't wait for the review.
I don't think I can make too many more of these phone calls.
Hey, how is it, huh? Should I look it over or anything?
But wait, this time.
That's the signs.
I don't think it is his best play. Certainly not his worst.
But you've written a money notice, would you say? A good notice commercially?
I would say it was a money notice, considering that it's Neil Simon. It wouldn't be a money notice for an unknown playwright, I would say.
How do you mean?
Well, because Neil Simon is his own star. He carries with him a certain... he's the only superstar playwright in the business who will bring in his own box office, irrespective of his notices.
It'll run a year.
I would guess so. At least 9 months. It may not go through the summer.
Channel 2 is Dynamite.
Good.
Channel 5 is Dynamite. Channel 7 is Dynamite.
Fine.
Channel 11 is Dynamite. The Daily News is a rave. The Times is good.
Even the waiters at Sardi's want to know about the New York Times review. A hit show means more customers in their restaurant. And it looks as though Sardi's will get them. In the 6 weeks since it opened, God's Favorite has been playing to 3/4 of capacity. Not a smash hit, but as Clive Barnes said, it'll run till summer. And Neil Simon, he'll be richer.
When President Ford last Wednesday told the nation that the State of the Union was not good, he was only confirming what most of us already knew. Take, for example, the building industry. In 1974, there were half as many housing starts as there were in 1973. And when something as basic as building suffers, the effect on related industries like lumbering can be catastrophic. So as the White House examined the state of the nation this week, we decided to look at the state of one town, the town of Garibaldi, Oregon, population 1,000. It exists only because of its lumber mill and some summer fishing. But last September, the mill closed down.
18 this year.
Times getting hard, boys. Money getting scarce. Times don't get better, boys. That I'm gonna leave this place. I worked the mill a long, long time. Nothing else I know.
National hard times statistics are a joke in Garibaldi. The nation pushes past 7% unemployment. Nobody's bothered to take a head count here. Maybe there's 40% unemployed. There are no fancy restaurants here. There's no movie house. You drive in, pass by 5 bars, 2 hardware stores, and a Dairy Queen, and you find yourself out of town again. And what you can see in Garibaldi from just about any place you choose to stand is that towering smokestack belching nothing.
It was real sudden when we first heard the plant was going to close down, but I didn't want to tell anybody or get anybody excited, and I actually knew it was going to close unless the market would improve. But the market didn't improve. And high log costs and the demands on the mill these days, I mean, you couldn't compete. If you can't sell, you just got to go out of business.
Bob Heyman managed the mill.
I've never seen it this bad, and we went through some real slumps in this business, but nothing like this. Because usually you can make a comeback, but I don't think we can make a comeback this time in this particular mill.
It's really more than a place of employment. It's almost like a life, because there was live people there, and it was so important to them, and it did so much for our community. It really is a sad loss.
Pat Patterson is 50 years old, a hard-working man who woke up one morning without work.
Each person tried to act like, kind of jovial about it, kind of joke about this, that, but you could see everybody had their big problems. My God, what am I going to do now? And of course, mills were closing down all over the country too, and jobs are scarce in this little community.
The mill once worked night and day, filling what seemed an endless demand for plywood. Garibaldi was a perfectly satisfied place, sitting content in a setting that gave it both beauty and value, the great Northwest timberlands. There's something very basic, very American about lumbering. Timber is the most honest material we use. And just about the time the mill was closing down, we were learning how to conserve and replenish it. But when we stop building, it becomes so much dead wood. The mill provided a kind of rugged prosperity for Garibaldi, but more than that. It gave summer jobs to young people so they could pay for education, and winter jobs to fishermen, some comfort in the long, cold months. And in this winter of everyone's discontent, the trawlers are as idle as the lumber mill. Fishing is seasonal here, so fishermen and lumbermen, and that means everyone, wait for the break in weather, for whatever alchemy that will make this place busy again. Meantime, a man has to eat.
I went to quite a few places throughout the area, and it was all the same thing. There was no work. Finally, a friend of mine told me that they were hiring people at the Tillamook County Hospital.
So Pat Patterson, skilled worker, took a job at Tillamook County Hospital as a janitor.
In situations like this, you're not really too selective in jobs, particularly if you want to stay in this area, which I do very much. It's pretty obvious after 30 years. I really had to take quite a cut in wages. I feel that I'm being compensated for that. I have a feeling of helping the community. The hospital, they have their problems too, you know, finances, and they have a big remodeling job that's coming up. And jokingly, I suppose you'd say, I'm helping fight inflation by taking a reduction in wages.
Who do they blame out here? It's difficult to rail against the fate of a world economy. People fix the blame on things they can see. Things like the export of American wood to Japan, where it's made into plywood cheaply, then imported back into the United States. The frustration of knowing that 1,000,000 miles from Garibaldi, there are people working, making a living from Oregon timber. And they blame the environmentalists, who kept demanding improvements be made, and who claimed the mill was polluting the air.
The DEQ, the environmental group, I believe had quite a bit to do with it. They were going to make them even stop blowing their lunch whistle because of noise pollution. To me, that whistle meant that there was going to be food on the table.
Bev and Richard Baggerly have lived here most of their lives. The only job Richard ever had was in the mill. Producer Grace Diekhaus talked to them.
I kind of feel kind of bad after 24 and a half years to have to start over again. I'd like to have something at this time that I don't have to worry about.
Have you tried to get another job?
Oh, yes. Even before the mill shut down, I went around to different mills and put in an application, but there was so many unemployed then, there was a list about an inch thick, and then your name goes on the bottom of the pile, of course. And so I have my application in now at about 4 different places, and besides the unemployment office. Mm-hmm. But there's nothing happening. I think everybody's doing a little bit more without. For example, we discontinued our garbage service. We canceled out some subscriptions that we had to different magazines. Mm-hmm. And Beverly was enrolled in a beauty club, where she got cosmetics. And we discontinued that. I hate to do that.
When the time comes that he does get another job, we will pick up where we left off.
Meanwhile, Bev has a job as a part-time mail carrier.
Hi, Mr. Dempsey.
She drives 80 miles every Saturday and whenever the regular carrier is away.
Good morning, Mary. I didn't have a thing for you today.
The few dollars she makes, plus the $88 a week her husband collects in unemployment benefits, leaves little for entertainment. A very occasional night out with some friends from the mill. And there's no escaping Topic A.
But I don't think the damn thing will ever open. You might as well forget it, as far as I'm concerned.
The minute they take a cutting torch in that front door, then's when I'll give up hope. They haven't done it yet. My husband worked out that plant for 23 years. And, well, I worked there 8. And like I say, I loved every minute of it. Still catch myself reaching for the lunch bucket. That isn't a dumb feeling, you know? It's supposed to be somewhere.
No, there's a lot of them, you know. It's got a lot of payments to make. Homes, automobiles. They ain't gonna make it. They're just gonna have to give it up and leave. Knapsack and all, they gotta go.
You get a man that's only getting $88 a week, he's suffering. But he's hanging around because there's 3 other guys, 300 I should say, other guys standing in line for the same job he's standing in line for.
If I was hiring someone, I'd get somebody a little younger and a little quicker and a little faster, you know. Somebody to grab the job. And the older type person, I don't feel like kissing nobody, you know. Hell with them, you can find something else. You bet. Always find something. So, why cry over the damn thing? I'll make her some end of it.
So we've received 12 checks.
We've received 12 checks already?
Collecting unemployment is a new experience for most people here, but it's fast becoming a way of life.
You could be a live-in housekeeper.
Thanks. I am one. I am one.
A way of life that can offer little more than that $88 a week, and even that will soon run out.
Most of the people from the mills are long-term residents. They have their home, their family is established here. They don't want to leave.
Dave Sheely manages the office. He's worried about Garibaldi and the future.
It bothers me because most of these people are going to exhaust their unemployment benefits, including the extended benefits that we're in by May of next year. And unless the housing industry can get going and we can get the wood products industry going, it's liable to be a bad year, worse than this year.
I worked the mill a long, long time. Nothing else I know. Now the mill is all shut down. I got no place to go.
It's almost like a set for a movie out here, a film of a town that died. The darkened skies and endless rain, the weather somehow going along with the economy. A miserable gray study in despair. And then you talk to a fellow like Pat Patterson, and you realize that the real strength of any place is in the people who live there.
We've got to quit asking for more and more all the time. Sure, everything's costing more, but the grassroots man, in my feeling, a mighty little man, is what's going to have to save this country, is the little man. I don't want people to get the idea that we're down and out in Garibaldi or in this community, because we've got a real pioneer spirit here, and the people, something like this won't put them down. They'll come back, probably be stronger than we were when this thing happened.
State of the Union. It seems it isn't so. Here's point counterpoint.
The time's at hand, Shana, when everyone is asking, how's the State of the Union? And I'm reminded of that old one-liner about Pat and Mike when they meet on the street. Pat says to Mike, how's your wife? And Mike says to Pat, compared to what? Well, if you make your comparisons only on the dark side of the economic picture, the State of the Union is terrible. Auto sales and housing starts are down, unemployment is up. Especially for black families and for persons living on fixed incomes, these are bad times. But even the economic outlook isn't a total disaster. Interest rates are slipping down, total personal income is almost holding its own, our exports are strong, and our economic problems have to be kept in perspective. Compared to the rest of the world, we're doing remarkably well. And compared to other periods in American history, fairly recent history, we're also in good shape. And Shana, the economy isn't everything. Our country has just emerged from its greatest constitutional crisis since the Civil War. We've tested our political foundations and found them strong. Sure, we still have a long way to go in human relations, but discrimination diminishes with every passing year. I don't detect any pervasive moral or spiritual sickness. With all its imperfections, the rule of law still prevails. Shana, we haven't attained equal justice. We never will, but we move in that direction. Now, it's no trick to find plenty of things wrong with the State of the Union, but I'm tired of the weeping and wailing. When a restoration of confidence is so desperately needed, I suggest that we try now and then to count the things that are right.
Too bad Gerald Ford didn't hear your State of the Union message, Jack. It might have cheered him up. But you know, for a majority of Americans, this economic crisis we're in is the biggest disaster within living memory. And Mr. Ford's State of the Union message shows he finally understands this. Well, it's about time. Public confidence in his policies was down to around 11%. But if you're right, and confidence is the key to recovery, I have confidence in the American people. They're not children. And like them, I have confidence in the man who gives it to you straight. Ford has now done that. I have confidence, too, in the man who dares to change his mind. Ford appears to have done that. He may even be that rare professional politician who really understands what it means not to have a job. Still, it was a curious speech. Ford, the lifelong Republican, invokes the names of two great Democrats, Truman and Roosevelt, and leaps into the drink. Roosevelt was elected 4 times on the common wisdom that you don't change horses in midstream. This time we can't change horses until 1976, so the president does it for us. He jumps off the conservative nag he has clung to all his life and begins paddling furiously in the opposite direction, towards tax cuts, rebates, and full employment. Mr. Ford is a famously good swimmer, and I hope he makes it, because for the moment we're all tied to his horse's tail.
Most of the mail we got last week was about our story on Norway, the little country that works. A recent immigrant to this country from Norway wrote, "You forgot to note that Norwegians pay 2 or 3 times what their American counterparts pay for cars, gasoline, food, and clothing." There was also a letter from a doctor who has no use for Norwegians. He wrote, "You're just another stupid American jerk. Norway is a tribal nation, and Norwegians are about as friendly as your Highland Scot or your Maine Downeaster." Another viewer called Norway a communist country. She wrote, "If you think life in the socialist communist state of Norway is so enviable, then go. The United States is not going to miss you." But from a Norwegian living in the United States came this: "Stop saying so many nice things about my country, or it will be too crowded before long." About our story on Pan Am and its troubles, a viewer wrote, "Instead of all those vacant seats going to waste, why not cut the fares in half and fill the seats with happy, contented passengers?" And finally, in the department of you can't do nothing right, one letter said, "The tone of your story was derogatory and unsympathetic," which was followed by a letter from a Pan Am stewardess who said, "Thank you. Fair treatment is all we asked, and on the whole, we received it."
I'm Morley Safer. I'm Mike Wallace. We'll be back next Sunday evening with another edition of 60 Minutes.
Grandma! Hi, darling. Your hair's different. It's so pretty. Well, I use Johnson's baby shampoo like you. Oh. When I saw my hair getting dull and lifeless, I said, it needs a little babying with a gentle shampoo. And Johnson's can't even harm a baby's eyes. Your hair's so shiny, Grandma. If your hair is losing its young, lively look, baby it with Johnson's baby shampoo from Johnson & Johnson.
If you're confused by weekly specials and wonder where the real car values are today, here's good news. Now on current models, you can get a $500 refund on any Capri, $200 on Comets if you buy now. That's solid value. I know. I'm a Lincoln Mercury dealer named Bart Starr. Make your best deal, and we dealers are making some great ones. Take delivery before March 1st, and Lincoln Mercury will refund you $500 on Capri, $200 on Comet. See the real car values at the sign of the cat.
I was born down on Hay Street, right up on B Street. Sully is my hometown. There's something about it, really shout it to the tops from miles around. We have doctors and teachers, lawyers and preachers, and from the old county town. They either hate you or hate you, but they'll never forsake you. Sully is my hometown. Hey! It's something about